Hi, everybody. Good morning. We came with a few questions for Luca, but we also want to give y'all time and space for questions. So start thinking, but I'll let my co-facilitator introduce themselves and then we'll get going.
Hi, y'all. My name is Romero. I'm a instructor here in the Communication Studies Department, and of course, collaborating with FBAF. So this whole, program was kind of about sex, and I think it's something that not a lot of folk talk about. Right. We mainly just talk about it with partners, maybe with friends. I know that I never really talked about it in school. And like one of the first things that comes up is kind of like what inspired you for, the creation of what is sex.
Well, I definitely had a very similar relationship to sex ed growing up in that there wasn't much of it, and nobody around me was educating like that. Mostly it was within like friend groups, all watching porn videos and stuff and trying to live up to some standard that we saw on the screen or something like that. But really where this film started was I had made an erotic horror movie over the pandemic, and I had done the thing that I thought was like the most scary thing for me to do in a film, which is be naked on camera. So I thought, let me make a horror movie about that. And uh, and then I thought, well, I can't continue on this trend because then I'll just be like a filmmaker who makes films about sex all the time. So I got to switch up the subject. And just then I got a commission from an art show in Nashville that was called the Sacral Project. And it was a multimedia show that was all about the sacral chakra, intimacy and connection and those sorts of things. And I thought to myself, well, if I got to talk about this subject again, I want to take the totally opposite approach. I want to make the brightest, poppiest, loudest thing I possibly can after making like a very quiet horror movie, you know. And I figured everybody at this show was going to do something very poetic, something deep, you know, like reach inside themselves. And my inclination was to go the opposite direction and try to make like the silliest, dumbest, loudest, funniest thing that I possibly could. And that's sort of how it began. And of course, it evolved into what you saw on the screen.
Yeah, so you might have actually kind of led into this one. But we did notice how colorful and kind of jarring and maybe discombobulating at times, like some of the graphics and visuals were. So we were just really curious, like, I don't know, do you want to say anything else about that process or maybe like what your intentions were with the viewing experience? Yeah.
I'm a huge, huge, huge cinephile, and I really, really, really love movies from the 1920s and like old silent stuff. And so when I see like a three-strip Technicolor, I just melt in my seat, and I really want to. I don't know. I want to recreate the feeling of like the just eye melting color that you see in Technicolor. So I think that was where I started with this. Uh, I thought to myself, oh, I've done some stuff in black and white now. What if I just cranked up all of the color settings on Premiere to 11, you know? And I really tried to break the program and I tried to make it do things that it wasn't supposed to do. And I really, really liked that I kind of found a color grade that was bad, but it like broke the image into like little bits of pixels over here and pixels over there. I loved it, and I hadn't seen something like that before, so that was exciting to me. And also with the transitions and sort of like the way that it flows along and stuff. I wanted it to continually like become a different movie like every 15 seconds or so. So I feel like it kind of started out as a sex ed video in a classroom, and then you're in a movie theater, and then it's like you're on the internet, and then you're like watching some files on your laptop screen, and it's just, you know, it keeps becoming different sorts of filmmaking, different sorts of videos all in one.
Like that. I kind of like that, where I mean, it keeps the viewer entertained, but also confused, right? So you're like, excuse my like language, right? But you're kind of like mind fucking us, like, you know what I mean? Throughout the film. So I really do appreciate, and like even watching it again, just like today, right now, the cutting of it, I did notice the transitions a little bit more. So I think the more you watch it, the more, you notice the transitions and stuff and how meaningful they are in the creation of everything. So I generally appreciate kind of how you brought in a lot of different perspectives of sex. Um, like it was kind of like all ages, right? Like you had like from older folk to like younger folk to like queer folk to cishet folk, like, it was a range. So I'm kind of curious, like I know we've all kind of maybe had an experience in some way or another about sex education, and I think this is something that we all can kind of relate to. So maybe if you can answer, like, what was the inspiration as far as like your sexual education? Like, was it like good enough? Do you think they could have done better?
Yeah, I remember we had about 1 day total, maybe in the high school, I think. Or I don't think we talked about it like before then, even in middle school or things like that. And of course, like the boys got the boy one and the girls got the girl one and stuff. And then they didn't switch them, so there was no there was no cross referencing. But I feel like the growing up, my sex education unfortunately like had to be sought out on the internet in spaces that I later realized were pretty unhealthy to like get your first inkling of sexuality. And it was pretty pervasive, like within friend groups in high school, like, people sort of almost like I don't know, it's like a mating ritual or something, like puffing out their chest and like all these boys standing around going like, oh yeah, well I fucked this good and I fucked that good and stuff like that. So I feel like only later, after sort of I don't know, taking my sexuality into my own agency, my own hands, and realizing that I didn't have to maybe do that, that's when I started to, I don't know, move beyond the lack of information that I had growing up, and start to educate myself. Bell hooks really helped with that. I was just talking to y'all last night about a book I read called The Will to Change: Men, Masculinity, and Love. And it really shed a lot of light about the ways that I had been raised, that I didn't really know that there was any other way to be and to be a man, you know? Um, I did interview my parents for this movie. I got to talk to them about their sex education. I interviewed a lot of my coworkers as well, because I worked at a crystal store at the time. It wasn't as weird of a subject as it would be if I worked in an office or something, you know? And we had a lot of conversations about religion, spirituality in relation to sex and things like that. And a lot of my coworkers were, in their 60s and up, and I thought that that was a super fascinating perspective too. Um, and then another cool thing that I tried to do with like the perspective is I've got some online friends that live in other countries as well. So I tried to reach out to them too and say, hey, what's it like in the UK? What's it like in Canada? Are there standards for this or blah, blah, blah. So yeah, getting their perspectives from people that are my age and people that are past my parents' ages too, like that was really important to me and cool. Mm. Mm. It's interesting. I have a friend from the UK whose voice you heard. She was the one talking about masturbation. And she told this story to me about one time going with a group of her girlfriends off to this pond that was sort of isolated. And they all skinny dipped at one point, and it was kind of like the first experience they had ever had doing that. But it was only because they had found that space off, that secluded space to go be by themselves. And then going back into school, it was sort of like feeling inadequate, feeling like she said, I think in the movie actually, feeling wrong for wanting to enjoy those things as a girl. Um, and so I was more surprised by the overlap from other countries to our country, and like the similarity in lack of sex ed. But also from the older generation, I really appreciated their perspective in saying like I would want to tell my younger self that my body is never going to stop changing and things like that. So with the perspective of time, I thought they actually got a very, very like deep perspective, even without growing up with that education, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna skip to my quote and then you can circle back to yours. Cool. Um, so there were just so many quotable moments, right, in Luca's film. Yeah. So one of them that really stuck out to us was your holes are meant to be filled. What are some ways what is sex interfaces with sex identity development?
Yeah, well, the concept definitely came from learning that duck genitalia is like real odd and it has this odd shape to it and they can kind of fit together in a strange way. And so I thought applying that to humans would be an interesting metaphor for like your body sort of being uncontrollable and like I don't know, the ways that you can control your body and the ways that you can't control your body and maybe accepting both. And I thought I really wanted to talk about like the socialization of how you interface with your own body, especially in things that you can't control. And I feel like that's where that line came from with like they told me that my holes are meant to be filled or something like that. Talking in a metaphorical sense, but also like a literal sense. And I love using the word fuckers as like sort of a pejorative for you know, like bad ways of negative ways of thinking about sex, you know? Um, and let's see, when I first like put together that little animation of the two people standing side by side and like their sort of penises are flipping back and forth, I thought like, okay, well that's like the central, I don't know, sort of visual idea of the movie there is like you know, it may not happen when you want it to, but you know, maybe you'll get horny and then it'll go away and then come back and all these sorts of things. So I think my my main takeaway, I think, after making this movie is acceptance of like the fluidity of all that. Acceptance of like it's never gonna stop changing. It's never gonna stop being an evolution. Um, and maybe to not let anyone tell you that you're like set in stone, you know? Like, oh yeah, okay, you figured it out. You're good now. You know, yeah, yeah. Um, because I just can't stop thinking about my like 75-year-old coworker who was just like I'm still like learning shit about myself every single day. Like I don't know what the fuck just came out of me, but you know, and like TMI, but still like those are conversations that it felt good to have in the open and like actually be able to talk. So yeah, so translating that into like silly little animations felt like soul fulfilling, but also like really fun and a way of like talking about it in maybe like a sort of universal language where you could just see it and go, oh, okay, they're sort of flipping genitalia there. Yeah, yeah.
Theater of it, right? How did your identity kind of develop as you created this in your own
Mm,
sexuality?
mm. Well, I have ADHD, if you can't tell from the movie. And uh, and I often found myself in intimate situations, sort of going to other places or just being somewhere else in my mind and sort of disassociating from that. And uh, and I feel like beginning to ask these questions of other people and find out more about their experiences definitely made me more comfortable to ask myself questions and like look inside and dig into that because some of that shit is kind of scary, you know? And and so I feel like a lot of this movie was kind of a plea to myself to not be so distracted and to be more present. And you know, there's a lot going on in the movie, and it's all flying at your face. But I feel like the sort of message underneath it is like almost like slow down, like just chill out. And my favorite part of the movie, or maybe one of them, is the deep breath. You know, just a breath in the middle of the movie. I I love a movie that will just encourage you to like breathe for a second. Okay, are we all good? All right, let's keep going. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't. Yeah, and like the structure of the movie, I tried to look up like sort of the physical like timeline of how sex works and like where your sort of peaks are and sometimes you can reach a peak and go back down and then come right back up and sort of do this. And so those breaks, those like necessary breaths that you have to take, that was something that is in the movie, but like I could really apply that to being in intimate situations with people, just going like, hey, let's take a breath and then come back to it, you know, things like that. Yeah, I tried to maybe reflect that in the structure of the movie, you know. Yeah, I tried to like gather just as many sources as possible, and this actually kind of relates to Hidden Flora, the film that played yesterday. I was the lead actor in that, and Ryan directed it. And that movie begins with like sort of 60s, 50s sex ed videos, and they definitely play funny today, but there's also, you know, there's some universal truth still in there, but it's just not deep in any way. And so what I did was I went to my garage at the time, and I dug out all the old children's books that we used to have, and there was one that was called What's Happening to My Body. It was like, you know, baby's first puberty kind of book. And that was a real inspiration because it was like talking about something kind of complicated, but very simply, and like trying to maybe get to the essential like visual of it. And so I took a lot of inspo from those pictures, and I took a lot of inspo from that book. And in fact, the movie was called What's Happening to My Body at one point. But um, what was most inspiring maybe about talking to some older people is that they went out and found out a lot about themselves outside of the education, and maybe even like because in spite of the education, you know, unlearning a lot of stuff too. So that was inspiring to me to go like, I just need to reach out, you know, I just need to ask questions. Yeah, yeah.
So, I know, again, like sex is like taboo to speak about and stuff like that. And I know, like, discussing sex, discussing identity, discussing all the things that your film kind of discusses, is something that has become political, right? In our schools, in our states, some of us, you know, can't even say the word gay. So that being said, in your opinion, is sex political or should it be considered political if every single one of us is part of that, you
Mm,
know?
mm. I I definitely think there is a politics to sex, just like there's a politics to everything. Maybe sex is over politicized, but nonetheless can't be separated from the political element of it. Not while there's legislation against people, you know, having their own autonomy and, you know, um, but I think the like cinema has the power to change a lot of that, and the images that we see have a lot of power to influence the way that we think. I mean, I was just talking about porn earlier too. Um, and so I think maybe as filmmakers, there's an opportunity and there's maybe a responsibility too to like put clear images on the screen or just put different images than what we've seen before on the screen. And and maybe to answer it simply, yes, I do think that sex is political, absolutely. But at the same time, it's so much more than that, you know? and really can transcend a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm? Oh.
I really appreciate what you mentioned about how you didn't really get information. Uh, I mean, it's not comfortable to go to parents and ask questions if they're not talking to us about it, and how you know, pretty much we're forced to go outside and find sites of information. And I appreciate how you mentioned that some of that information or what you were exposed to wasn't the most positive for developing agency as a sexual being and
Yeah.
all those kinds of things. And what you were saying, I don't know what sex education is like, but yeah, separating, and then like you said, and not being able to go see the other one. Like,
Yeah.
why are we to keep a secret about human beings and human development and human bodies?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That might be the political element right there, is the like inhuman part of it, you know? And like rehumanizing it might help with that perspective.
I actually covered that. And I'm wondering if that even, like, if that was any part of the thought process at all, that having that freedom to explore all of sex, you go, oh my God, none of it's for me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I love that perspective. And now I wish I had added a little something in the film. But yeah, I tried to structure it where it's like it gets progressively more I don't know, out there with the sexual like tastes, and maybe I don't know, I wanted to at least acknowledge some of the kink, space, and but looking at it through like maybe it's all the same, like kissing and eating someone else's shit, like it's love to other people. That's love, Yeah, so so yeah, and I like that yeah, you come around like at the end and it's just kind of like here's all of it, and now set out on your journey and figure out what you like. Yeah. Here's it all collaged together. Yeah. Yeah, in a soup. So although I didn't think too much about asexuality, I do appreciate your perspective on that, because I do feel like it kind of comes in a circle, I guess, the movie. Yeah. I did want to mention there's a movie that really, really inspired a lot of the visuals for this, and it's the movie Daisies by Vera Chitlova. It's a 1966 movie, I think, and it's Czechoslovakian, and it's like the most I'm sorry, eyeball melting movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, yeah. So if you liked some of the visual style of this and you want to see like, sort of maybe where a lot of those visual techniques were developed, check out this movie Daisies. Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks so much for watching.
All right, y'all. So there's going to be a viewing in here, I believe, at 11, and then there's going to be discussions in the bleachers. So those the bleachers are going to have presentations. So,